The Texas hype has convinced me that the national media has completely forgotten what a good team is. The makeup, the moving parts of a good team have been completely disregarded, completely, in the hyping up of Texas football for this 2022 season. Have the national media forgotten that defense needs to be competent to win championships? That special teams matters? That trench play, offensive line and defensive line play matters? And we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I just want to start out with criticizing the hype, and that's going to be the main portion of this video, is criticizing this hype surrounding the program of Texas. That's what I'm going to start out with because I think it's perfectly appropriate. And I think this is actually, if you're a Texas fan listening to this, I think this is one of the main culprits as to your program's failure. I think it's the constant hype. And that might sound stupid because hype is really just words and actions to support a team. But think about college football. It's more than a physical game. It is a mental game. Coaches outcoach each other. There are psychological tricks that are played on other teams to get them down, to demoralize them, to give your team a better chance at winning. Sometimes you have to demoralize, outthink, outsmart the opposing team who might have more talent than you overall. You have to have a stronger culture than the other team sometimes when they have more talent. You have to do certain things better than the opposing team to win, whether it's physical or mental. Texas, I think a big part of the reason they have failed is this hype from the media that sets them up for failure, that gives their head coaches less time to succeed because the expectations are permanently set this high, and if you can't finish top 10 within 2 or 3 years, well, you're just not it. But Texas is busted. Texas is a busted program. They are broken. They are a shattered plate. And instead of trying to tape it back together and serve it as brand new and hype it up to be this amazing product, what you have to do, just throw out the broken pieces and make and mold a new plate. Just do that. And I think that's what Steve Sarkisian is doing with Texas, in all honesty. I think that him going to Alabama after what happened at USC and his alcoholism, him working his way back up the ladder, being one of Alabama's greatest offensive coordinators in the Nick Saban era, in my opinion, coaching Bryce Young, coaching Tua Tagovailoa, managing that awesome offense. I think, in my opinion, that he is going to do something at Texas. I don't know what it is yet, but I don't think he's going to just fade away, never have a winning season, and do absolutely nothing of significance. Because at some point, Texas will be back. And at some point, the talent at Texas will be properly utilized, and Texas will be a threat again at some point. And I think it's more likely than not that Steve Sarkisian will at least give Texas a year of that. But I don't think it's going to be this year. And I think that the hype being given right now it's heresy. It is blasphemy to have Texas in the top 10, which the FPI has them as a top 10 team. It's utter blasphemy. I don't understand it. They've had little to no success over the past 4 years. Texas hasn't. Their defense, their offensive line play is subpar. The only reason Texas is ranked this high is because of their offense. And because of all the factors that you would presume are weighing them down, Texas being this high means that their offense is being thought of as an elite offense, which in my humble opinion is disrespectful to Ohio State and Alabama especially, but also to teams who I think will field better offenses in Georgia, in Michigan, in Pittsburgh, in Utah, in Michigan State, in Ole Miss, in other teams as well, Arkansas, Nebraska, especially Tennessee. I don't get why I didn't mention them earlier, and a plethora of other teams that I think will have more efficient offenses. Texas statistically will probably have a really good offense. Because look at what they were this past season. This past season, Texas had the 18th scoring offense in the country. Statistically, Texas's offense was great for a 5-7 team. But you know what the stats don't tell you? Look at their schedule. Look at how they scored 70 on Texas Tech, how they scored 58 on Rice, how they scored 48 on Oklahoma, 56 against Kansas. By the way, they lost 2 of the games I just mentioned. They would score a lot against garbage teams, and when it came to Power 5 teams like Oklahoma, against teams whose defenses were not good. You look at teams like Baylor and Oklahoma State, where they only scored 24 points. Those were actually solid defenses. Look at even Arkansas, 21 points. Look at Iowa State, 7 points. Teams with, again, solid defenses. They didn't do much damage. What they did this past season, they would torch teams with inferior defenses compared to their offenses, but mightily struggle on offense when it came time to face a solid defense. And I don't anticipate that that's going to change very much. I think the offense will improve, but overall, I can't expect it to make this big leap when there are still questions on the offensive line. And even if it does, let's say I'm wrong, because this is a preseason opinion, I very well could be wrong. What about the defense? And again, we'll get to this in a few minutes when I talk about my takeaways, but you look at the transfer portal, and Texas is only bringing in one transfer on defense. The other ones are all on offense. And it's good to strengthen your strengths. It's good to sharpen your sword. But what good does a very sharp, big sword do for you if your opponent also has a very sharp sword, but he has armor, and you have no armor? What good does that sword do for you then if you don't have proper protection, if you cannot hold teams to a specific amount of points? Texas's only shutout was against Rice. Rice is no one, essentially. And this is why I don't like Texas football, is the hype surrounding it. And pardon me if I rant here a little bit. And Texas fans, I don't like your program not because of you, the fan base, or the tradition, but because of what your team embodies. Your team embodies hype. They embody rat poison, as Nick Saban would say. And I think that's an ingenious phrase of his. That's what you have embodied for the past several years. It's what Michigan embodied from, I would say, 2016 to 2020. They embodied hype, rat poison, and it did not work out to their advantage. You still have that. Michigan got rid of it by having a horrendous 2020 season, and then the media abandoned them. Michigan embraced an us against the world mentality. They completely changed their coaching staff, changed everything, and they had an immediate turnaround. That is why they had success. In part because the media and the hype abandoned them, and they had to look in themselves in the mirror with honesty. They couldn't be given false promises. They couldn't be told, it's okay, you're better because you're this, by the media. They had no one trying to cheer them up. No lies being told to them. It forced them to self-reflect and to improve. Absolutely. And for some reason, the media hasn't learned this lesson with Texas. This past season, Texas, they were ranked in the top 25. They were expected to get 8-9 wins. They went 5-7 and imploded and had meltdowns in most of their games. It was phenomenal. That's why I don't like Texas football. I'll go as far to say I'm a Michigan fan. I've already said this several times, but it's important for context. If Michigan State or Ohio State played against Texas, I would cheer for Michigan State and Ohio State for the most part. Same with Notre Dame. Same with Alabama. Same with Georgia. Same with most other teams in college football because of what Texas currently embodies. Texas carries around a big hollow stick that if it hits you, when they attack you, it does no damage, but they speak loudly and boldly. At least in the past, they have. I think their fan base this year has quieted down. I've seen a lot of Texas fans who actually don't approve of this hype, and I think that's very wise for them to do that. They shouldn't be approving of it, because what it's going to do, I'll tell you what it's going to do. We'll go to their transfer portal. You see the Alabama wide receiver, Agiye Hall. You see Quinn Ewers. I think those are the two transfers incoming to into Texas, that are big risks. Because Agiye Hall has been known to have attitude issues. Quinn Ewers, the reasons that he left Texas, to me, were suspect and could hint toward attitude issues. Preseason hype emboldens those people. That's what it does. It emboldens that kind of attitude. And Texas does not need that kind of attitude. And Texas fans, they don't want to be set up for failure again. I don't want to see them set up for failure again. And I'm not saying that everyone who's making these predictions about Texas being a good team, I'm not saying that means they're purposely setting up Texas for failure. Josh Pate thinks Texas could have the number one scoring offense in 2022. And I love Josh Pate. I think that he has probably the best sports podcast currently about college football, in my honest opinion. And I disagree with him on this take, but I don't think he's trying to pump up Texas to be failed. I don't at all. I think this is his genuine opinion, honestly. And he himself even said that there were questions on Texas's defense. But then there's the media, people trying to get views and etc., trying to make money off of this and getting attention. And ESPN's FPI, people take the FPI and take that as fact. This is a prediction metric. It's not necessarily fact, but people take it as fact. So that's going to influence how the polls begin. That's going to influence how people think about Texas. And it's all so psychological. And we're going to be done with this now and get to some points just about players and about past success. But psychology is a big thing here for Texas football. And I think I think this hype works against them. And that's why I don't like it. Now, let's just talk about some points that I have that would seriously indicate, in my opinion, why Texas is not back yet. One, it's a minor point, but I think it's valid to say. Their past success is very, very little for their past 10 years. Since 2009, Texas is 83-67, barely above 500 since their near national title winning season in 2009. That's barely above 500. That's at a similar level of past success over the past little more than a decade. It's about the same as Nebraska. It's not good. Nebraska's another program who I think is busted. Now, I think that they're going to have success this year. I think they're going to go 10-3, win the Big Ten West, lose in the Big Ten title to Ohio State. And you may be thinking, well, why are you criticizing people who think that Texas could do the same thing in the Big 12, but not Nebraska? And part of it's honestly just opinion. There's not I couldn't write a book of evidence on why Nebraska will do better. Part of it is just my thoughts. Another part of it is because I think the lack of returning starting production for Nebraska. There's a lot of incoming transfers who will replace former starters. A lot of former starters for Nebraska are departing the program, whether it's to the draft or the portal themselves. I think the new players, the new starters, having that many new starters opens up the door for a culture change that Scott Frost needs. I think that Scott Frost massively upgraded the coaching staff on offense. And if you look at Nebraska last year, Nebraska had one of the worst coaching staffs in the Big Ten. Obviously one of the worst cultures, one of the worst special teams units, and one of the worst offensive lines. And if you change a few plays, they'd get 8-9 wins, potentially win the West. And that's how much was working against them, even from inside the program. And now that they've removed most of that interior adversity, I think they could really break through. Texas, you have a lot more talent than Nebraska. You have had an easier schedule than Nebraska for several years because in 2021, Nebraska faced Michigan State, Oklahoma, Michigan, Ohio State. Those are 4 top 10 teams. 4 top 10 teams they faced. 4. That's a lot of top 10 teams that they faced, and they faced even more ranked teams, I believe. So Nebraska had one of the toughest schedules in the nation this past season. Texas has had an easier schedule than Nebraska for several years, in my opinion. They have had more talent. Their coaching staff this past season, I think, was better than Nebraska's this past season, amongst many other things. I just think Nebraska, with their coaching changes, their portal utilization, and other things, puts them, along with a finally easier schedule than what Texas has, puts them in a position to succeed this year more than Texas. But again, this is my opinion. I could be totally wrong. I was just using them as an example. And Texas can totally have success this year. I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm saying it's unlikely. I'm saying I don't think so. I'm saying I think that if you're a Texas fan, you're being set up for failure once again by the media. But I'm not saying it's impossible. With the skill position that this offense possesses, are you kidding me? This team could totally have the best offense in the Big 12. Totally. And seeing how Oklahoma State seems to be more of a defensive team now, Oklahoma's going to move in that direction. Baylor's more defensive. Kansas State's very offensively focused, but they don't have the same talent. Texas could totally have the best offense by a mile in the Big 12. Now, do I think they will have it by a mile or even have it is pretty yet to be determined. I'd have to know more, in my own opinion, before I make a big prediction like that. And I think that Kansas State, with some of what they have, will actually have a more efficient offense, not necessarily one that's better by statistics. But anyway, they have a lot of talent, and the offense is improving. I know I mentioned that some of those transfer portal additions can embolden a toxic culture, but that's not guaranteed. That's a risk. Agiye Hall, Isaiah Nayor, Jaleel Billingsley, and Quinn Ewers, that's some serious talent coming through the portal. Some serious receivers and a serious quarterback coming through the portal, along with a recruiting class that's top 5. So Texas is certainly bringing in talent. I think their offense is definitely going to improve. But what about the defense? And what about even the offensive line? There's plenty of questions on the offensive line. There are some starters that depart from that position. The defense was abysmal this past season. The defense was 99th in the country in opposing points per game. The defense got only around 20 sacks, while the offensive line allowed more than 20 sacks. So Texas's offensive line allowed more sacks to opponents than Texas's D-line forced sacks against opponents. That's a sad statistic, and that's going to have to improve. Texas's trench play is going to have to improve if they're going to contend this season. And finally, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. And this plays into the hype. This also plays into a little bit of Quinn Ewers. I think more of the hype, though, in retrospect, of writing that down. Quinn Ewers is a phenomenal talent at QB. I said that when he got committed to Ohio State. I'm going to say it right now. He's a phenomenal talent. He will be a great QB. He will be drafted. He will be probably Texas's first QB since, I don't want to say Colt McCoy because I don't know for sure, but probably the most significant Texas QB drafted since Colt McCoy. He is good. Steve Sarkisian is an offensive mind. I have absolute faith that he'll develop him properly. But the success that he is, in my opinion, expected to have this season is very high. A very high bar has been set for him, as should be. But it's not guaranteed he will succeed at that high level, especially if the offensive line does not improve. And also, for the whole team, just the whole team in general, just because ESPN's FPI ranks them at number 6, and just because a lot of different analysts and experts think they're going to be really good doesn't mean they will. Again, look at my Michigan Wolverines in 2019 and 2020. Look at the Michigan State Spartans in 2016. Look at Penn State in 2020 and 2021. Look at yourselves in 2019 and this past season in 2021. Just look at several different teams. I mean, look at USC in 2018 when they started off ranked in the top 20 and finished, I think, like 5-7 or 4-8. Just because you're predicted to be something doesn't mean you will. You have to own it. That's why the games are played on Saturdays, and that's all I have to say on this video. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.